Feeley is a multimedia network news producer specializing in breaking news and field production. After growing up in Washington, D.C., Jack attended the University of Maryland's Philip Merrill College of Journalism. It was there he discovered his passion for storytelling. Jack has worked for national media outlets such as ABC, NBC, and Univision, and is now based in Brooklyn. Thank you so much for coming, Jack, and doing this with me and Different Enable.
No, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to hearing all about you and your story. And
well, how much time do you have?
But yeah, no, it's an honor and a privilege to have you. So thank you.
Likewise, thank you.
You have a learning difference. What is it, and how would you define it in your own terms?
So yes, I have a learning difference. At first, when it was discovered or noticeable, I guess they called it a learning disability.
Right.
And it's the technical term is developmental dysphagia.
Okay.
It's a language processing disability that hinders my ability to comprehend written language, and to find deeper meaning within the text of it. So, for example, reading a book. No problem. I can speed read through that thing. But if you ask me what it's about, I will look at you with a blank stare. Or if they ask me what the theme of a book was, the blank stare. But obviously now that was early on in my childhood, and I was at the time when it was discovered, I was living overseas too. So I was transitioning from mostly Spanish to English, and that was a really difficult transition. So in my own words, I would just say it takes me a little bit, or it takes me a couple times to comprehend language specifically, and then be able to formulate my own thoughts and words to respond.
And so you had mentioned that you were overseas when you were quote unquote diagnosed. What age was that? And how did it manifest itself? Like, what were the first signs that your parents noticed to indicate, there may be something wrong?
I think it gradually happened over a series or over a set period of time. But to the best of my recollection, probably when I was about 3.5 to 4, we were living in Bogota, Colombia at the time, and I could get by with very simple phrases. Spanish, obviously, I was a little bit better at, because in that time you're still kind of formulating your language, you're still putting it together. And then when my parents were told that we were rotating home to the States, obviously, we speak English, and my brother took to it. He's 3 years older than me. He took to it like a duck in water, but it was just an absolute brick wall for me. My parents noticed that I was getting more frustrated, upset, lashing out, in shutting down. School was, I can vaguely remember having fits at school, because it was a very traditional teaching style, which is verbal, which was just kind of teaching up at a whiteboard or a chalkboard or something like that, and that's just I was having a real difficult time keeping up. And so what do you do when you get frustrated as a kid, or I could argue as an adult? You shut down. And so my parents noticed that, and we went off to see a number of different specialists back then. But it was so early on back then, in the early 90s, that it was just, no one really knew.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of research and development since, and we'll get into that. But back then, clearly there's not as much to have known about as there is today.
No, I agree. I think there were cases where I went to doctors, and they did approach my parents and say he might just be, and this is an awful word, but he might just be retarded. And it's a word that I don't use often, I'm so lucky to have the parents that I have. My mom's from Puerto Rico, and so she can get spicy when she needs to, and she just refused to accept that. Right. And we were lucky to find one speech pathologist who, for the life of me, I can't remember her name, but I remember her face, and she was truly the first person to crack me. and break through
Wow.
and see that you know, I, it was there.
Right.
It was there. I so badly wanted to say things, but I just couldn't do it.
Do you remember what that process was like working with her?
One-on-one, a lot of one-on-one, a lot of breaking down barriers at first. I put her through her paces. I know for certain that I would grow frustrated at myself. Again, we're our own worst critics, and I would get embarrassed. But then when I saw that she wouldn't judge me for me being embarrassed, she would talk to me more. She would talk it out with me. She would say that you're you have it right on the tip of your tongue, and trying to just pronounce regular words, like trying to count to 10 in English. And I remember she would do this, because I couldn't pronounce 3 for some reason. And she would point to it, she'd be like, 3, 3. And so those little things just help you. And I think for my sake, she saved my life, along with Takes a Village. So
Of course, I get it.
A lot of other people, but it was very one-on-one. It was very visual too. I think that helped a lot as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You attended the Lab School of
I
Washington.
did.
Can you tell us about the school and how you were taught there?
Yeah, so when we moved to the States, or when we rotated back home we settled in Washington, D.C., and right away my parents got to looking, even before we landed there, researching if there were any types of specific schools with small class structures, individualized teaching, and with the help of my grandmother, my father's mother, Susan, who has a master's in English and had taught at Fordham University. She actually had found the lab school, and through connections, and had put my parents and I in touch with them. And the first visit didn't go that great because it was a new thing, and I was kind of blown. I didn't leave my father's side, but thankfully they called me back and said, "Hey, come back in for another visit," and it went well. The school itself is the first thing I noticed, it was a lot of colors. It was a lot of, the main administration building is a castle. There was art all over the place, and I thought, wow, this is loud. And then I met the founder and the then leader of the school, Sally Smith, who's since passed away. She was herself dressed in all different sorts of colors, and I thought, oh wow, that's kind of neat. She said good morning, and I got accepted. And when I got there, I was a little nervous, but when I settled in, I saw the class structure, I saw the individualized teaching. I still remember my 2nd through 6th grade teachers' names, and because each one of them had like a specific effect on me, and no matter how many times you'd get frustrated, or I wouldn't necessarily I wouldn't throw tantrums because I know what my mother would do to me. I think if I shut down, they were still there. They were still there to kind of say, "Hey, listen, take 5. Let's come back to this." So the teaching method was very individualized, patient, but for me, visual. And that's what the beauty about that school was, is that each kid had their own difference, and each kid had their own strength. My strength was very visual. I needed to be able to look at a word problem, but to be able to visualize it. And that, when I took the SATs, I used those methods to try and although I'm not the greatest test taker in the world.
Me either, so don't worry at all.
Yeah,
Me either.
Exactly.
Wow, that's amazing. So the lab school, in a nutshell, it's individualized, and it basically caters to people with a variety of learning differences.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
What would you consider to be an advantage of your learning difference, and what would you consider to be a disadvantage, if any?
I see more advantages, obviously. I think my advantage is that I'm very good visually. If I need to break something down, or if I need to look at something, it's why I pursued the career that I'm in now, because it's a very visual medium. But there are aspects of it that require writing and require reading and other things like that. So There are just little tricks that I've developed over the years that you don't even think are tricks. It's just who I am. I'm not the greatest math person in the world, but if I need to do quick math, I have little tricks that I can think of. Off the top of my head, if you ask me, like 84 plus 65, 5 seconds to answer, I'll say like, okay, 84 plus 60 is 140. Okay, all right, 144 plus 65, so 169, and just little 149, things like that. And then when I write scripts for stories, I'll break down. I have these little tricks that I learned from back in my days at lab. So I'll learn. I will stand back from it, say, what's the story? What are we tackling? And what's the most important information that needs to be at the top of the list first? And then break it down from there. Disadvantages, obviously there are some disadvantages. I have a really hard time focusing reading. I still, for the life of me, it's an endeavor to try and read a book. It is. I have books all over my apartment and whatnot, but and people say, "Oh, did you read that one?" It's like, not yet, because it's hard, because I'm always trying to picture it visually, and it's really, and I get tired of reading and whatnot, and so it can be that's still kind of a challenge for me.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I mean, I have reading comprehension difficulties.
There you go. So you
and
understand
it's very hard for me to get into a book and keep at it.
Oh.
And I consider it very strenuous and sustained attention. And it's more like taxing on my brain. So
Yeah.
I get it. It's a no-brainer.
My
for
family,
me.
they're all voracious readers. And so they, again, it comes from that putting that familial pressure on myself. And I've thankfully learned to stop doing that.
Yeah.
And just be myself.
No, I completely understand. So when was the moment that you, quote unquote, accepted your learning difference?
It's hard to pinpoint a moment, but I would say that I think it happened over a period of time where little by little, I mentioned before how when I went back to the lab school 8 years after I had graduated, that was a big moment to be able to sort of accept who I am, what had helped make me, and the people involved in that. That was a big, I would say, if I had to pick one, that was a big aha moment of like, I can now come at peace with myself and the path that I took, because I think it just buried a lot of the negativity that I had put on myself and the shame that I had put on myself. To just be able to look at the mirror and say, hey, listen, you're not doing bad. You're doing pretty good.
Right.
That moment was really special. The gala was really special. And then as I continued forth in my career, I was presented with opportunities to take those and to say, wow, I never would have imagined that I would end up working at the #1 nightly news program, or then move on to the #1 morning show. Then, and in my current role now, being able to sort of pick and choose what I want to do as a freelancer, and also forming connections and friendships with people who want to see you succeed, who want to help you succeed, and that let you be part of a team that that is informing the world, that is trying its best to, our mission is to cut through the noise. So I think little by little, but if for sure, if I had to pick a moment, it was probably that moment in 2015 where I went back and was able to flip the page.
Right. What would you tell, if there was something that you could tell your younger self way back then, in order to help you, kind of grow and, be the person that you are today, what would it be?
Invest in Facebook. I'm kidding. No, honestly, lighten up on yourself. focus on yourself, and you can be both a family man and think of others, but you have to, the most important care is self-care. And for a long time, I always cared about what other people thought about me. I always cared how I presented myself, how I talked, how I would act in front of people. Did I screw something up? And I would always castigate myself for that. And if any perceived, in my own mind, perceived slights that I may have thought I've done, and it was, mentally it was draining. I used to make this joke all the time that if I donated like my brain to science or something like that at that time, and they open it up and all that, it would be black and blue, because I was just beating the heck out of myself mentally, and just not cutting myself any slack. And over time now, events in my life and have led me to come to terms with that, and to say to myself, like, relax, you're good.